All right, welcome into another Auburn Live show. I am Justin Hokanson from AuburnLive.com, part of the On3 Sports Network. And as we always do after Auburn football games, we catch up with former Auburn quarterback Ben Leard for our Monday morning quarterback segment. Ben, what's up, man? How's your weekend been?
Well, with the exception of the absolute debacle meltdown that we experienced yesterday between the hours of about 1 and 3 p.m.
Yeah.
Other than that, man, it's been a great weekend.
I got my Support the Troop shirt on, Veterans Day, Veterans Weekends. Thought I would just kind of give some love to the vets for the podcast today. Yeah, man, I don't know where to start with that game. I mean, it's still like a day later. We record this on Sunday, and for most people that listen to it on Monday morning, and it's hard to fathom. I mean, I don't know. Like one day we'll look back on this and maybe believe it, but it's still so astonishing what happened. I mean, if you break down, if I just told you Auburn blew a 28-3 lead, just that would be pretty remarkable. If I told you they did that at home, that would be more remarkable. If I told you they did that at home while Bo Nix threw for almost 400 yards and 2 touchdowns and no turnovers, you'd be like, all right, this doesn't even make sense anymore. And then if I told you that they didn't just blow the 25-point lead at home, they allowed the other team to score 40 unanswered points, 40 straight points.
6 straight touchdown possessions. 6 straight.
Yes, six straight. 6 straight. I was trying to think because they had the possession right before halftime that I really don't count,
Well, but at the same time, that was really that was a scenario for them that you look at it. They scored right before the half, get the ball. I mean, it was a perfect storm. And I guess it's just me, Hoke, and I know it's a total team effort or lack thereof. But man, when you're up 28-3 or 28-10 at the half, the message to that football team, especially the defensive unit, is guys, if they don't score again, we win. Period. Yeah. Offensively, in my mind, they had done their job at that point. They had done what they needed to get done. They had scored 28 points. Mississippi State had zero idea of what was going on defensively versus Auburn's offense. Now, what was so frustrating to watch, and this is pointing the finger at the defense, there were zero changes or adjustments made at any point in time. Will Rogers had all freaking day to sit back in the pocket and absolutely just surgically dissect the secondary for Auburn. And it was horrendous to watch. The kid, he made great throws. They made great catches. But at the end of the day, at some point, as a defensive coordinator, as somebody that's making decisions, when you see that your 3 guys are not getting any type of pressure on a consistent basis, and he's able to sit back there and drink a Pepsi and eat a sandwich, you need to do something differently. Yeah. And granted, people can look at it from a negative perspective and talk about the offense, but hell, the offense has scored 28 points, man. 28 points in most scenarios wins games. Yeah. And it was painful to watch. I mean, it was painful between the defensive situation, there has to be logic behind it, but why you go for 2 points in that scenario, it was game over then.
Yeah.
When you do not successfully convert that 2-point conversion, you needed 2 more possessions in order to even come within a reasonable opportunity to win the football game. If in fact you kick the extra point, you at least give yourself a situation where you're down by 8 and it's 1 possession. whether you kick an onside kick and successfully recover it, or you roll the dice, kick it deep, and try some way to stop them and cause them to punt and turn the ball over. I just, there were a lot of decisions made that I obviously think that they start from the top down. A lot of decisions made yesterday that it just kind of left me scratching my head. And it was most importantly on two what I would consider special teams decisions, one going for two and the other, the fake punt. That baffles me too. But then the lack of adjustments made on defense, especially in the second half, were mind-boggling.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack. I think real quickly on the 2-point conversion, I agree. Like, I don't know what the analytics say in that case, but that's a case where, in my opinion, I think you keep momentum and hope on your side, and that's by kicking the extra point. You keep it within 8, which is one possession. Your defense goes out there. They know it's one possession. The offense now for Mississippi State knows it's one possession. It puts pressure on them. And I think when you go for it and don't get it, there's more risk there. Now we're sitting here playing, as we do, Monday morning quarterback. If they get it right, if they get it, it's touchdown, and to think about the momentum that comes off that. But I think the risk there is a little too much to kick the extra point, keep the momentum. The only thing I can think is by going for it and either getting it or don't get it, you know more clearly what's ahead of you. I don't know. Like, if you don't get it, we got to score twice, so you then have to kick an onside kick or what.
I mean, I think you know more by kicking it. I think you know your path, right?
Yeah.
Hey, line up, kick the extra point. We're down by 8, and then at that point, the only true decision you have to make is: do we attempt an onside kick, or do we kick it deep and play defense and utilize our timeouts, and do what we need to do and try and give our offense a situation to win the football game or tie the football game, most importantly. And granted, the logic behind that could have been, man, we can't feel confident about giving them the football back. Well, hell, you were giving them the ball back anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, that they were going to have to stop them offensively in order to get the ball back to even tie the game in the first place. So you're right. There could have been something analytically that was telling him otherwise, that led to that decision. But just in your gut and having the experience and coaching the number of games that he's coached, I did not understand that decision. I did not understand the fake punt. That could have been a situation, honestly, where it's, Chapman could have made the wrong decision. A lot of times, and I don't know this.
Well, he called it.
And all right. So that was a bad call.
Yeah.
It's a horrible call, especially when you line up in punt and they're in punt safe. There's no way that's going to be successful. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Why not? Why not line up in punt and have Chapman have two options? If they are doing this, then you kick the football. If they are doing this, then we run the fake punt. That's a level of decision making or a level of execution that they need to expect Chapman to be able to make.
Yeah.
But that, to me, that was the start of the nail in the coffin for the game. It showed desperation.
Yeah,
it showed a lot.
It was a desperation mood. Yeah, when that I actually tweeted that. I said when that didn't happen, I said, all right, it's full desperation mode now. If that's what you're calling, man. I think it's easy. First of all, Will Rogers' performance was, I won't see a better performance. I might see a subjectively better performance from a quarterback in Jordan-Hare Stadium. Maybe a guy guts out an injury, running, I could subjectively. But the guy was 24 of 26 in the second half for 5 touchdowns in the second half of that football game. Incomplete 2, touchdowns 5.
He was lights out.
So it's like, and even if you go back, I can't, I have to do it off the top of my head, but really from the second quarter on,
Yeah.
he was like 34 of 38. Um, After starting the game 50%, like he was 7 for 14 or something like that to start off with.
And
So
I'll tell you too, Hope, one of the most prophetic things that happened during that ball game is I watched the cut up afterwards, the TV copy, and the sideline reporter, the sideline analyst, made the comment during the first quarter after a couple of stymied drives by Mississippi State's offense. She overheard Mike Leach telling his offensive unit, called them all together and said, guys, they cannot stop us. They can't do it. We are only stopping ourselves. Dial it in, do your jobs, and they cannot stop us. Well, who'd have thunk it? I mean, they absolutely railroaded our defense.
wow.
About the second, from about honestly, really that last drive of the second quarter through the end of the ball game, and Auburn unfortunately showed they had no answers, and it wasn't as if they were going through multiple choice situations. They ran the same exact stuff every single time, and it's hard even it's frustrating to even talk about.
It is, and that game went like I thought it would, and it didn't go like I thought it would. I
Right.
thought Mississippi State. I said all week. I said just prepare yourselves, Auburn fans, Auburn defense, whatever. Just prepare yourself. They're going to complete a lot of passes. I said he would complete 35 passes in the game, like comfortably. I'm like he's going to complete at least 35. I think he had that like at the end of the third quarter. But I'm like the way Auburn played, I'm like he's going to complete a bunch of passes. What I thought Auburn would tighten down. With that kind of offense, sometimes the red zone can be difficult. So I thought Auburn would clamp down, force a couple field goals, maybe get a turnover, and I thought the yardage would be fine for State. I thought they'd pass for a lot of yards, but I thought Auburn would keep them to like 24 points.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Unfortunately, Auburn didn't just give up the yards in the middle of the field; they gave up the yards all the way to the end zone and continuously couldn't cover slants at back of the end zone and all that. And so, that's an interesting tidbit. I didn't know about the Mike Leach saying that. I think when you look at it, the defense being the more frustrating part of that game, I think is the easy call because 6 straight touchdowns, 40 unanswered points. But like for the second, I say for the second, I mean, really you go back to Ole Miss, the second half, the entire A&M game, and then the second half. So you're talking about 4 good quarters out of 12 in the last 3 games for the offense.
Yep.
I don't know. I mean, defense would be the easy answer to what was more disappointing out of that game. But another second half collapse from the offense is equally disappointing.
It is.
Because they just did it. If it were a one-time thing, I would say defense easily. But the offense did that against Ole Miss. And then they did it the entire game against A&M. And then the second half, again, they go missing. That is hard to explain outside of good initial game planning, good initial play calling out of the gate from Bobo. How do you not explain that as then once teams sort of get into the game, get into the rhythm, you become predictable? I don't know. I mean, I don't see Bobo going conservative. I don't see him dramatically changing the play calls as the game goes on. How do you explain it?
It didn't look as if he changed his tactics.
I mean, he ran a little bit. Like there was a possession or two where all of a sudden they come out and it was like run, and you're thinking. But I think part of that was Mississippi State starting to go on a run, and Bobo thought, I've got to mix in more runs. We've got to figure this out and shorten the game. But I mean, other than that,
honestly, it just you're right, man. I mean, you look at it, and if you had as an offense, you can come back and look at them and dissect their lack of execution in the second half to the point of just stepping on their throat, I mean, just any type of any continuation of the success that was had in the first half, that game's over.
Yep.
If they don't have to score touchdowns on 4 consecutive possessions like you did in the first and second quarters, but just some points, field goals, sustain a drive or two, do something to step on them. And that game's over. It's finished.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I think the possibility of my kind of intermingling a few more runs probably played in part of his trying to protect Auburn's defense, because they knew as a staff, well, we give the ball back to them, they're going to score. I mean, we've got to milk it some way, somehow. And they just weren't able to find opportunities to gash them in the run game and get a 2nd and 2 or a 2nd and 3 to where you could justifiably run the ball again or on 3 or 4 consecutive plays and not put you in an obvious passing situation. And that was difficult. I mean, I think the number one Achilles heel right now, in my opinion, for Auburn is they do not know how to finish. They don't know how to finish.
Which, can I just stop you there? That's amazing, because if you think about how the season started, forget the first 2 games. Penn State, close game, fine. That was a tough game. But if you think about it, they finished against Georgia State. They finished against LSU. They finished against Arkansas, that last drive to put a nail in the coffin of that game. The Ole Miss, they didn't do much in the second half, but they ran it on that last possession every down and ran out the clock. So there have been games where they did finish. And then, but exactly like you're saying, you look at the A&M game where the fourth quarter, they got dominated. And then the Mississippi State game where they don't finish well at all. In Ole Miss, you could say they didn't finish well, and they did. Like, I give them credit for running the ball, but also the second half was not great on offense. So I think it goes back to what Harsin has said all along, which is they're inconsistent in everything they do, in execution, in preparation. They're inconsistent in everything they do. And what happens? You see a great half like Ole Miss and a great half like Mississippi State. And, and then you see terrible halves. What you see is what you're seeing on the field. And it's something Harsin said over and over and over again. I don't think it's a big secret. I mean, if you go back and listen to what Harsin has said all year, he's telling you, we got to be more consistent. I got to see my guys prepare better and be more consistent. He's even talked about, there's guys that are dialed in on the front row of film study, and then there's guys that are not. And talked about how, hey, that's going to carry over to the game.
Yep. That honestly is a level of maturity, in my opinion. That's a level of maturity top to bottom. And there's certain pieces of that leadership just can't quite weed out. Not even martial law inside the locker room. There's parts of that you've got to let that filter itself out, let it graduate, and then bring in better. Yeah. Bring in and create that type of environment that it's unacceptable. And honestly, man, you said it best. If we were to talk about this ball game after the fact and having not watched it, and we started rattling off Auburn's offensive statistics, especially Bo's statistics, no way in the world Auburn loses that game. No way. But that's also the second statement that we would make in consecutive weeks. Because on the flip side of it, if we talked about the game on Sunday versus Texas A&M, or we were talking on Sunday after the game against Texas A&M, and you were to tell me that Texas A&M didn't score a single offensive touchdown, I'd bet my house that Auburn wins that game.
Yeah.
And so it's just that part of it. You look at the offensive performance. I thought the receivers stepped up and played great. They made catches. I mean, Kobe Hudson had the game of his life. I mean, he made some miraculous catches, caught the balls that should have been caught. Shedrick caught the balls that should have been caught. Bo, I thought Bo played well. I really do.
He had one little stretch, probably, if you were being super critical. I mean, he had a little stretch where when the momentum was changing, the momentum was shifting there in the middle of the game, and I can't remember what drive it was, but he had a drive where he threw behind Kobe Hudson on just a little simple crossing route. Yep. And throws where you're like, he had some throws where you thought, okay, get your head back going.
There was a scenario in that game, and I can't quite remember it, but those folks that have either watched it on television or gone back and watched the TV cuts, there was a possession in that ball game. It looked to me is if they didn't know the down and distance, that it was like
I know what you're talking about.
third and 8, 3rd and 9. He throws a 5-yard out to either Fromm or Deal to Shanker, and Shanker just dips on out of bounds.
Yeah,
and it's 4th and 4.
Yep.
Well, and the offense is just sitting there, and it's not even they're not even in the field of play where you would consider going for it. I mean, they're clearly in their territory. What in the world? Where's your head at? What are you thinking? And then that was about the same time that he had a couple of errant throws. And, you do question, all right, where you need to get back dialed in. I do think it's obviously after what is perceived as an ankle injury, he was hampered. It really, really limited his ability to get out of the pocket and try and make some plays. And that probably hampered or handcuffed Mike Bobo in his offensive play calling as well. But that's just stuff, man. You gotta deal with it. You gotta adapt. And it's just not something that was done yesterday. And I know we're harping on the bad and harping on whatever. It's a loss to Mississippi State.
Yeah.
And then you obviously compound the frustration by watching Ole Miss do what they're supposed to do last night and beat A&M and keep you in contention to win the West. Well, now, they're just 2 more SEC games. And I granted one of them is the Iron Bowl, but it is as it should be, and most of the case is and always will be just a sheer matter of pride as far as the Iron Bowl goes. It's not going to have any type of postseason scenarios on it. It's not going to be who wins goes to the SEC championship, whatever that scenario may play out or has played out as a result of yesterday's game. But man, you would have loved to have Jordan Hare be filled with that level of pressure for the Iron Bowl to determine the SEC Western Division champion. But if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas.
Yeah, that was disappointing. Auburn had an opportunity in front of them, and they essentially blew it. I mean, technically, technically Arkansas could beat Alabama. Auburn could beat Alabama. I think there might still be a path, but in all reality, that opportunity is gone. Now, look, before the season, I don't think any Auburn fans or supporters or pundits thought that opportunity would ever be in front of Auburn. Like you could be in November and have a chance to win the West. That'd be interesting. But it doesn't mean that the opportunity being there and now being gone doesn't sting.
And then you listen, you're hitting the nail on the head. We are, and I'm guilty of it too. We are as fickle as the day is long.
Yeah.
If you go back and listen to the first podcast that you and I did, and we talked about what our expectations were for the season, I literally, if I'm not mistaken, I said I would be tickled to death with an 8-4 season. And I would think that would be a massive success that could propel them into the 2022 season, have a full recruiting season under their belt, which I think will end up extremely, extremely well. And then on top of that, you're opening the doors in the fall of 2022 to 100% football dedicated facility. So things are going the right way. Things are moving in the direction that we as Auburn fans want them to move. It's just we were enamored. We were enamored by a little bit of that sparkle, and we bid it hook, line, and sinker. When in the realm of reality, 8-4, 7-5, with what Gus left behind.
Yeah.
And the job that Derek and Brian and Mike and all the staff have done, and the players, most importantly, what the job they have done is a tremendous, tremendous effort, and they all should be commended for it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that Gus left behind an 8-4 team. I mean, he left behind the team he had last year, and that's what it is. You can make up for that, skill players. But you can't in the trenches. You can't.
That's right.
You can't be tricky and find. I mean, the trenches are the trenches, and that's what it is, and that kind of makes Auburn what they are, really.
Yeah.
Because it goes back to the run. I mean, look, we talked about Bo Nix in the game he had. The running game, Tank Bigsby had 33 carries 33 yards on 7 carries in the first quarter. He had, I think, 8 carries for 9 yards for the rest of the game. That makes no sense. I mean, I thought the first quarter, I said, look, this is as good as Auburn's run the ball against a Power 5 opponent this year. Like, this is as consistently. Jarquez had a couple good runs. Tank had some good runs. They were consistently running the ball well in that first quarter. I think they had about probably 60 yards from the running backs or so. And I'm like, this is as consistent as they've been. And it just disappeared.
Yeah.
I mean, just as
Yeah.
quickly as they had it. You count in sacks. Obviously, Finley had Finley's fumble lost him a bunch of yards. Nix had a sack. But like I just told you, Bigsby had 9 yards for the rest of the way, I think. Jarquez Hunter has now gone 4 straight games where he hasn't topped 38 yards rushing after that great start to the season.
Yep.
But as a team, Auburn rushed for 102 yards in the first quarter. Javaris Johnson's pass was a part of that. The rest of the game, 4 net yards rushing in the last 3 quarters of the football game. And that's kind of where it went. I mean, all the passing game was there, but when it got tight, Bobo tried to go back to that running game a little bit, and it was not there. It disappeared. It disappeared, right. And I don't necessarily blame him for you got to keep doing it. Bo can't air it out 50 times, but it can't disappear. And when it disappeared, and when it disappears, Auburn's balance goes out the window, and their rhythm goes out the window, and it just offense just falls off a cliff.
And man, it's very, and in my opinion, it starts up front. Period. It starts up front. Offensive line, they have got to perform better. Period. End of story. It's a mindset. They are, with the exception of the Georgia defensive front. Now, granted, Texas A&M is really good up front. They are really good. They are not Georgia.
No, look what Ole Miss did. I mean, Ole Miss got a good offense. But Ely had like 150 yards rushing on them.
Ole Miss. I mean, people should run a clinic off of what Ole Miss did to A&M last night. That should be a full clinic of looking at how they executed offensively in order to beat that A&M defense that is really, really talented, really, really good. But at some point, you've got to give yourself a gut check. It's got to be what's in your crawl. It's got to be whether or not you like getting your ass kicked. And ask yourself that question. From right tackle to left tackle. Do I have guys or a guy that I want to carry into a back alley bar fight with me? And at this point, I haven't seen that. I haven't seen those guys.
Yeah.
And whether it be, you can go back and ask guys, like you can ask each individual quarterback over the last 40 years. They've got guys that they would tell you that about. I do. Cole Kubelik would. Kendall Simmons would. Mike Pasillo would. Colin Sears would. Hart McGarry would. All those guys they would rather fight you than look at you. And I don't know that that's there. There has to be a level of just pure hatred of losing in order to have you be dominant in the trenches. And every school, every team that has that level of dominance, I guarantee you they've got those players. You go back and look at the TV cut-ups of the Tennessee-Georgia game that was played last night. Georgia, as dominant as they are, you can tell they like Petey rolling guys. They enjoy pancaking linebackers. And they absolutely let you know it when they do it. It's just not there. You just don't see it. And in order for Auburn to get to that point of dominance, in order to allow Mike Bobo to utilize the weapons that he has in his backfield or in his at the receiver position, they've got to develop a sense of dominance and an absolute just road grader type offensive line. And that is obviously a work in progress. They have vastly improved. I'll give them credit. They have gotten much better. Yeah. But they have got a long way to go.
Brandon Allen on Twitter asked, Why does the offense seem to go away from plays that were successful early in the game? And I think that's a fair question. I don't
Absolutely.
know that they are. I mean, I'd have to go back and look, but I mean, if you ask Brian Harsin, it's execution. It's not that they just decided not to run good plays anymore. He would say they stopped executing, but it's really
Well,
not. It can't be that either, though, because Brian Harsin also says time and time again, teams make adjustments, and we have to, as coaches, have to know. I mean, if you're an offensive staff, here's what we're going to do. Then they're going to make this adjustment or this adjustment, and then here's what we're going to do. I mean, right? Like, I'm not even a coordinator. I know that's what they do. They certainly have to. So when those adjustments happen, let's say State makes adjustments, where were Auburn's?
you've got to adjust. You got to adjust to their adjustments, and that's a great question. It's a very valid question, and I think part of the answer to that question is just the sheer evolution of offensive football. So, again, in the Stone Ages, 20 years ago, when an offensive coordinator or when a play caller called a play, it had very limited options on it. It was line here's the formation, and you run outside zone. So you weren't at the disposal of the decisions being made by the quarterback during the play or as the play unraveled or played out.
Yeah.
In today's offensive game, they very well may be calling the same play 10 times, but the decision that Bo makes in the midst of that play could vary on every single play call. He could give it one instance. He could keep it in one instance. He could throw the ball, just like the touchdown run or pass that we call. So the variables or options off of the same play call, I think, really are misleading in the sense that they very well may be calling. Mike Bobo may use the exact same terminology 15 times in one game, but it has so many variations off of it that the decision, the variable of it is the decision that Bo makes in the heat of the moment. Now, here's my answer to that. You tell Bo what to do. You say, I don't care if this has 6 options. Give the ball to Tank. Same scenario. This goes back to, in my mind, this goes back to the Penn State the Penn State 4th down, right? When Brian Hartson comes back and says, yeah, that play call has 5 different options on it, yada, yada, yada. That's the decision that Bo made, this, that, and the other. Well, it may have 5 options on it, but you're the head coach. And you've got the best player on the field standing next to Bo, who's been gashing Penn State's defense for the last 2 quarters. Give him the damn ball. Tell Bo, I don't care how many options this has on it. We're gonna commit to option number 2, and that's give it to number 4.
Yeah.
So the offensive play caller, the offensive coordinator, has full autonomy over what happens. You can call a play with multiple variations, but you can also dictate which variation takes place.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair question. And the more I think about the defense, again, some of these questions, I don't think we'll get a straight answer. I don't think we'll get the real story to in terms of the defense. If you think about, obviously, we go to, well, where were the adjustments? Where was the pressure? Where was the blitzing? Where was the change? Well, that clearly wasn't the game plan. Auburn was going to go in, pressure with 3, force the underneath stuff, tackle well, which they did in the first half. Look, Mississippi State had, coming into that game, had 1,800 something yards after the catch receiving. They had 0 yards after the catch at halftime. Auburn was doing what they wanted to do: tackle, 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 tackle. If the offense doesn't fall off a cliff, Auburn wins. No matter what Mississippi State did in the second half, Auburn still wins that game. As disappointing as the defensive effort would have been in the second half, Auburn wins that game. So, I have to wonder if Mason's up there calling defense thinking, if anything, we're going to keep doing what we're doing and hold them off. Okay, if they get some more yards. Okay, if they get another touchdown.
Because he
Okay, if they
thinks
get another touchdown. If the offense gives me 10 points, that's 38. Then I have to give up 4 second half touchdowns just for the game to be tied.
Yep.
You got to think Mason's going, well, I don't think we're going to give up 4. I certainly don't think we're going to give up more than 4 touchdowns in the second half. So, I mean, why would I make it easier for him by blitzing and giving up a big play at the end of the game? Now, having said that, at some point, I don't know, beginning of the fourth quarter, when Mississippi State takes the lead, like at some point you have to go, okay, all right, I tried. The offense has clearly hit a brick wall here, and we quite literally cannot stop them. Now I've got to adjust something. At some point, when that switch happened, when it became 29-28, maybe, I guess, or something like that, you got to go, okay, well, now I have to bring pressure. Now we got to switch it up for sure. I have to do that. And that didn't seem – they had those 2 plays where they had a sack and then the Moultrie targeting call, which we haven't even talked about yet. But the Moultrie was just a good play. I mean, they did bring a corner blitz, but Moultrie made a good play. But really, they didn't start bringing any additional pressure. The couple guys just made some plays there. So I get Mason sticking with it for a while, but by the start of the fourth quarter, something should have shifted, and we didn't see that. And that's what I wouldn't understand.
And two, and when you think about it from an offensive line perspective or an offensive perspective, if you're only rushing 4 and you bring an additional player, that's additional defense, so that's nothing out of the norm for what these guys on the offensive line see on a day in, day out basis. When we talk about blitzes, when we talk about dead level cover 1, cover 0 blitzes, we're referring to bringing more hats than they have to block. They've got 5, you bring 6.
Yeah.
That level of pressure. And again, there was an instance where Roger McCreary came on a corner crash. It was successful. It was a little bit of a coverage, what I would call a coverage sack.
Yeah. Yep.
Because it wasn't something instantaneous. The left tackle picked up McCreary easily. Yeah. The TD Moultrie call was absolute garbage. It was absolute garbage, and that was a very, very. That was a huge momentum shift because they obviously went down and scored. Yeah. And, it was a really bad kick in the gut for Auburn, especially defensively. Yeah. But it took the air out of their sails 100%. There were 5, if I'm not mistaken, there were 5 third downs, third and longs converted or perceivably converted by the referees and their flags for Mississippi State. There were 5 first downs for sure. I know there were 5 first downs that Mississippi State gained via penalty. I don't know that they were all third downs, but Mississippi State converted a couple other third and longs, but there were 5 defensive penalties that gave Mississippi State a first down. And I'll go so far as to say too, though, with the sheer number of times that they throw the football, you have obviously a much higher propensity for defensive pass interference. I get it. That happens. It is what it is. And you just got to kind of take that with a grain of salt because Rodgers was so precise and so accurate that, all right, let's say you do have a guy, all right, I'm going to play off him a little bit, give him a little bit of space so that I don't interfere. Well, okay, Rodgers is going to hit him right in stride, and it's going to be a first down anyway. So you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. So you expect those. But then on the instance where I'm harping on this TD Moultrie targeting call, which was there was nothing else he could have done. 100%, nothing else he could have done. It was a tremendous play, great effort by him. It was face mask to face mask. I mean, basically, he bear hugged the kid.
Yeah, that's what it was. It was a bear hug. And just to set up, it was 36-28 at that point. It was 2nd and 16. it would have been 3rd and 21 without. It was about to be 3rd and 21, 8-point game. Whatever there was, 8 minutes, whatever. And you have Mississippi State, who doesn't have a good field goal kicker. So who knows what happens? I mean, it's up in the air right there if Mississippi State gets any points at that point. Completely up in the air.
Yep. So I don't know, man. It just is frustrating to talk about. You walk away with a handful of positives. I mean, obviously they executed certain scenarios very well and scored points in the first half. Defensively, they did some things in the first quarter, I guess, that were, opportunities for development. But there's also a large bag full of plays and things that happened in that ball game on all three phases of the game that, there's some things you got to take back to the drawing board. And as a coaching staff, you wonder what they do, or you wonder how they really coach against this repeating itself. In my mind, you take 15 defensive plays from yesterday's game. You take 15 offensive plays from yesterday's game. You watch them one time and you're done with it. Move on. Don't let Mississippi State beat you twice. And because there's tons of film that you can go watch and really dissect and drive yourself crazy. Tell the guys, we're going to watch this one time. When it's done, it's done. We suffered enough embarrassment. There's no sense in rubbing salt in the wound. It's over and move on. Because I'm telling you, if they linger on this too long, they're going to go over to an upstart South Carolina team in Columbia and get beat. And they cannot afford that to happen.
But that would be a whole nother level. I mean, Mississippi State loss is one thing. South Carolina, yes, they beat Florida, but we see what Florida's issues are right now. South Carolina just lost to Missouri this weekend. But look, if we look as of us recording this, we don't know the status of Bo Nix. And if TJ Finley starts, that dramatically changes the offense. I mean, I think we've seen enough of Finley a little bit here and there to know and seen Bo Nix progress. That's a drop off. That's a drop off. And so, it could make that game interesting. Where do you go from here in terms of, so Brian Harsin talked about, we'll end on this, he said after the game, look, moving forward, it comes down to when you come off 2 straight losses and you're trying to motivate and get back on track, when adversity hits, you find out who loves football. You find out who loves preparing. You find out who loves practicing. And I think that's true. Derek Hall said that after the game, there was a lot of guys in that team that love football. Like we love football, and a lot of tears were shed. We were not happy about that game. How do you sort of take this moment? I mean, I wrote that. Look, I wrote on Sunday. I said in a piece about Harsin, I said let's be clear that a first year coach, it really isn't judged on wins and losses. They are. But that's not that for that 1 year, it's not the most important thing.
Right.
There are things behind the scenes. There's foundational stuff. There's cultural stuff that has to be put in place, no matter the results, for that coach to run his program. That's what matters. I think I've seen a lot of good things from Brian Harsin in that regard. I've seen the players respond well to a lot of that in that regard. So, as terrible as that historic as that loss was, I'm not going to take it and read anything into it in terms of what I think Brian Harsin will do in the future. I do think how they respond the next 2 games could be indicative. Brian Harsin's never lost 3 games in a row as a head coach. So what if that happens against Carolina? Then what if they lose to Bama and it turns into 4? There's some things that I think we could see over these next 2 weeks that could be indicators. But I think we've seen some fight from this team too. You want to see them fight against Carolina, win that game, come back, be competitive against Alabama, and then I think that's all you can ask for at this point. I mean, this season, this team isn't going to. At this point, we know the things that Harsin wants out of a program: consistency, toughness, all that stuff. There's been signs of that, and then there's been signs of obviously it not being there. So, I guess what's your biggest takeaway moving forward? How do you view that loss? What's the lens in which you view that state loss moving forward?
I mean, the lens that I view it from is extremely disappointed. I mean, just and I think you got to look at it and take everything into put everything into context with regards to, number one, losing at home. In the first place. And then on top of that, seeing that everything was somewhat within your reach still, especially knowing that Ole Miss beat Texas A&M. So that really compounds the difficulty there. Now, how this coaching staff, where they go from here, that's a big question. And you'll be able to see that over the next couple of weeks, obviously, and executes against South Carolina. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, what do you do? I mean, how do you approach these kids? How do you talk to them coming off of 2 straight, very difficult, hard fought losses? Well, in my opinion, you don't change your philosophy. You don't change the way you coach. Now, there may be some instances where you need to love on them a little bit. You need to put your arm around them and let them know that they're working their tail off, and that they're not practicing to lose. They don't go out there with the intent of giving up 40 straight unanswered points. That's not what they're doing. They're not doing that on purpose. So in order to build their confidence back up, you got to let them know you support them. You got to let them know that they're working hard, and it bothers them more than it bothers us.
Yeah.
So there's some building blocks that need to be placed down for these kids in order for them to continue along the path that Brian Harsin and his staff want to go on. They're there. The kids love football.
Yeah.
You can look at Colby Wooden, you can look at Derek Hall, you can look at the way Zacoby plays, Smoke plays. I mean, all these kids, they love playing the game of football. And thankfully for us, they're wearing orange and blue. I mean, I'm tickled to death with the way that they carry themselves, with the way how hard they play, the amount of enthusiasm they play with. You lost a game. It's disappointing. The sun came up the last 2 days. Roll on. Play the next one, 1-0. And I think that's the biggest thing, is continue to coach the way that you're coaching. Don't change that, but take advantage of an opportunity to put your arm around one of these kids that might be the bell cow that leads the remainder of the players, and let them know that, hey, listen, we're riding your ass. We're on you hard because we know what you're capable of. We know what this team is capable of doing, but we also know the level of expectations that we have for this program. We're not bringing in 5s. We're looking for 10s. We expect 5-star blue chip execution. And that's what our expectations are week in and week out, not only on Saturdays, but Sunday through Friday as well.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Well, we'll see. I think it's going to be a tough week of practice. I would imagine probably some film watching and throw it away, like you said. I can't imagine they're going to watch a lot. Mississippi State just executed at a high level. And look, I think we'll see what happens at the quarterback position. That could just throw another wrench into how this team responds, obviously. But we'll see. Look, the good news is there was good things that happened on the recruiting trail. There were some visitors there that had a good time. I know it might surprise people. Well, why would you look? You can always recruit to something. If you lose that game, guess what you can say? You can say, look how bad we need you, and so there's always a way to spin it in recruiting. And so I think Harsin are still on track to have a pretty good first class. He just has to build his culture. Harsin is a culture guy, and his program has got to be built a specific way, and he's got to have players that fit that mold for him to be successful. So that's what we got to wait and see. We got to see him recruit. We got to see what happens next year. I think every coach to some degree is that, but Harsin's very much so. I mean, if you don't fit in as a person, as if you don't, like he said, if you don't love to sit on the front row and watch film in practice. And if you don't love the process, you're not going to fit in with Harson's program. And there might be some guys that leave after the year because they don't really quite fit into that. And they're like, hey, we need guys that are all in. So there's just a lot still to determine about Harsin, his team and staff. And so I read a column in the OA News after the game against Mississippi State, and it didn't strike me as it was very much like, time for talking's over, Brian. Actions. Now we got to see wins. It's like, come on, you're not even one season in. I mean, let's not take that tone quite yet of like everybody just basically it was like, hey, at this point, la 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 on the 1-0 stuff, go win games. Like, no, we're not there yet. That's like 2-3 seasons in when he's still saying the same stuff and you still see 7-5. Then we can talk about that, but not 10 games into the first season with a team he didn't recruit.
Hey, did they not just realize that they gave a specific coach 7 years to and he consistently said the exact same thing every press conference?
Yeah.
And you're doing this to somebody only 9 games into the season, into his first season. Just back off. Let it play itself out. It is going to work out. And hey, you mentioned it. After the season, there may be kids that leave.
And coaches.
And you got to respect it. There may be coaches that leave. You're exactly right. Even the best programs in the country have kids and coaches leave every single year. It happens.
Yeah.
It wasn't what they thought. The kid wasn't what the program thought it would be, or the coach wasn't what either or thought they would be. So that's part of the cycle. That's college football today. You just got to get in with it and go.
Yeah. Well, it'll be an interesting week. See if Auburn can bounce back against South Carolina and put a good foot forward and at least go into that Iron Bowl with a win. Really is all they need. They just need a W in that column going into the Alabama game. We'll see what happens, man. That was certainly a historic loss, an all-time collapse that I don't know that we'll ever completely believe. We'll look back on that and go, I still can't believe I watched that happen. But you know what? For a lot of years, I said the same thing about, I was standing on the sideline for the 2010 Iron Bowl. And there's a lot of times where I've said the exact same thing. I've gone, that Alabama team had no business losing a couple of games they did that year. That Alabama team was stacked, and they were up 24-0. Like, I'm like, I still today say, I mean, I can't believe Auburn in that environment came back and won that game. So, it does go both ways sometimes, and there's those games where you're just like, it's hard to explain. It's hard to explain how that Alabama team in that environment would lose that football game up 24-0. McElroy had 300 yards passing in the first half of that football game. I mean, it's a similar thing. You're like, if I told you that stuff, you'd go, well, no, there's no way they lose. But they did. And Auburn just got caught in that thing on Saturday. They couldn't stem the tide. They could not turn the momentum. They couldn't do anything on offense to stop it. And it just became very frustrating. So it is what it is. Auburn loses the game 43-34. Never lost a 25-point home lead at home until Saturday. First time ever. So there you go. All right. Any parting words, any parting shots, parting wisdom for the people?
Just hang in there with them. It is. Things are as difficult as yesterday was, or excuse me, as difficult as Saturday was. They're moving in the right direction. I still have the utmost confidence in all of these players. I still have the utmost confidence in Brian Harsin and Derek Mason and Mike Bobo and all these staff members. They're doing some great things, not only for these young men that are currently in the program, but they're going to do a lot of great things for the recruits. They're going to do a lot of great things for these young men as they grow and develop. And I'm telling you, these are building blocks. You just got to get on board, support them. And, you got every right to be critical. I understand that. That's the age we're in. But when it's all said and done, I swear to you, they don't like giving up a 25-point lead any more than we liked watching it. I promise you that. So just pump the brakes a little bit on all the critiquing and criticism and, you know, and just jumping on people's back and jumping on top of their heads. Just slow down a little bit. Let them go win in Columbia next weekend, and it'll make that Iron Bowl pretty good.
Yeah. All right, Ben, thanks for joining us, man. As always.
You got it, Hope. War Eagle.
All right, auburnlive.com. Go subscribe, be a part of the site. Cole Pinkston, Jeffrey Lee do a great job with recruiting, and our site and team will only be growing as we grow. So it's an awesome place to be. Come be a part of it. auburnlive.com. We'll see you next time. Bye.